There's a petroleum geologist named Richard Findley who was so broke in the 1990s, he nearly quit and took a job as a restaurant cook. And the oil field he accidentally stumbled onto 9,000 feet beneath eastern Montana turned out to be the largest onshore discovery in the continental United States in over half a century. The Bakken was a four-letter word back then. Every major company had walked away from it, but Findley kept drilling anyway. And what he found didn't just save his career. It unlocked a technology now used across the entire globe, and it quietly helped turn America into the world's largest oil producer. August 10, 1864. The Civil War is still raging, and somewhere along the Bozeman Trail, a wagon train stops. Not for battle, not for gold, but because someone noticed something dark and slick seeping up from the earth. That was the first recorded discovery of oil in Montana. Not a typo, not a legend, a buried fact that almost everyone forgot. By 1920, Montana had its first commercially productive oil field. Cat Creek, in the central part of the state, was something genuinely strange. The crude coming out of the ground was so pure, so light, that farmers could pour it straight into a Ford Model T and drive away. No refining, no processing, just oil from the ground into the tank. It was distributed free of charge to anyone who showed up. The state had never seen anything like it. Montana took that moment seriously. In 1925, the state literally drew new lines on a map because of oil, carving Petroleum County out of a portion of Fergus County. It was the last county Montana ever created. Think about what that means. A state does not name a county after an industry it considers temporary. Montana was telling you exactly what it believed about its own future. For decades, that belief held. The wells kept producing. The towns kept growing. Oil was woven into the identity of the state the same way wheat and cattle were. Montana was not just sitting on oil, it had built something around it. Then the wells started slowing down. Through the 1970s and into the 1980s, the picture shifted. The easy oil was gone. The big companies, the ones with the rigs and the capital and the geologists on staff, started looking elsewhere. Texas had more. Alaska had more. The Bakken Formation, that vast stretch of rock running beneath Montana and North Dakota, had been poked and prodded for years, and the verdict kept coming back the same: not worth it. The shale was too tight. The oil was there, but getting it out was not economically viable. One by one, the major players moved on. By the mid-1980s, Montana's oil story was, by almost every professional measure, finished. So what does a petroleum geologist do when the state he works in has been written off? Richard Findley found himself in exactly that position, working out of Billings in the mid-1990s. He was not a geologist at a major firm with a department behind him. He was operating on thin margins, drilling in a formation that his peers had essentially declared dead. The Bakken, in his own words, was a four-letter word. Nobody believed there was money in it. The companies that had tried came back empty. The conventional wisdom was settled. Findley kept going anyway, but the financial pressure was real. He was stretched close enough to the edge that he seriously considered walking away from geology altogether and taking a second job as a restaurant cook just to keep the lights on. That is not a metaphor. That is where he was. One of the most consequential geological discoveries in American history, sitting a few thousand feet below a man who was wondering if he could afford to keep drilling for it. He did not quit. He cut costs where he could, kept his focus on the Bakken, and in 1996, he went back underground, drilling west and north of Sydney, in Richland County, in the same formation that everyone else had abandoned. He was not expecting to find anything that would rewrite the map. He was just working the rock. What happened next is what nobody saw coming. Findley was almost broke enough to walk away from geology entirely. If you were in his position, staring at a formation everyone else had written off, would you have kept drilling or called it quits? Drop your answer in the comments below. Because what he found 9,000 feet underground in 1996 is where this story gets genuinely hard to believe. 9,000 feet down, in the flatlands west of Sydney, Findley's drill bit hit something that wasn't supposed to be there, and it changed everything. Not the shale. Everyone knew about the shale. The Bakken's two outer layers of tight shale had been poked at for decades, and the verdict was always the same: oil present, unextractable, move on. But this was the middle, the dolomite layer sandwiched between those two sheets of shale, porous, permeable, a geological pocket that nobody had been targeting because nobody thought to look there. Pay attention to what happened next. Findley started mapping the layer, and it kept going and going. When he realized it was continuous for 50 miles, he called his partner and said, "I think you'd better sit down. I think we found a giant oil field." That is not a man being dramatic. That is a geologist who has spent years in a dead formation, suddenly understanding what he is looking at. But knowing the oil is there and getting it out are two entirely different problems. The dolomite layer sat nearly 2 miles underground. The rock required a method nobody had used at that scale. Findley took the discovery to Halliburton. Engineers there worked out a solution that sounds simple in retrospect, but had never actually been done together before. Drill horizontally through the rock, then fracture it hydraulically. Horizontal drilling existed, hydraulic fracturing existed. Combining them, in sequence, on the same well, that was new. That combination is what made Elm Coulee possible, and it is what made everything that followed possible. The numbers that came out of Elm Coulee are the kind that require a second read. The field covers 750 square miles of Richland County. The oil-bearing rock is only 45 feet thick, about the height of a 4-story building, sitting nearly 2 miles underground. By 2007, Elm Coulee had become the highest-producing onshore oil field discovered anywhere in the lower 48 states in 56 years. Not the biggest field ever found, the biggest one found in over half a century. And it more than doubled Montana's entire state oil output. Oil tax revenue to Montana jumped from $13 million to $92.7 million. A single field, in a county most Americans cannot place on a map, rewrote the state's fiscal picture. But Elm Coulee is not the story. Elm Coulee is just the door. The Bakken Formation, the same rock Findley was drilling when he made his accidental find, spans 200,000 square miles. Montana, North Dakota, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. It is not a local deposit. It is a continental-scale geological event. The USGS estimates between 4.3 and 11.4 billion barrels are recoverable with current technology. Continental Resources has put that figure as high as 40 billion barrels. The total oil in place across the Bakken may be as much as 400 billion barrels, though most of that remains locked in rock that current methods cannot economically reach. What matters is what can actually come out, and what can come out has made the Bakken responsible for roughly 10% of all U.S. oil production. The technology Findley helped prove at Elm Coulee did not stay in eastern Montana. It moved to North Dakota's Bakken fields, then to the Permian Basin, then to shale formations on other continents. The horizontal drilling and fracturing combination that Halliburton engineers worked out for one small dolomite layer in Richland County became the engine of the American shale revolution, the same revolution that took the United States from being told it was running out of oil to becoming the world's largest producer. Picture that flat eastern Montana landscape from the opening of this story. The pump jacks, the wheat fields, the horizon that looks like nothing is happening. Beneath all of it sits one of the most consequential geological formations in modern energy history, unlocked by a geologist who was one bad month away from cooking food for a living. A field everybody wrote off, a geologist everybody counted out, a technology nobody thought would work. That is what is hiding beneath Montana.